On March 25, 1911, the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory in New York City was full of mostly young immigrant workers making women's blouses. The factory occupied upper floors of the Ash Building near Washington Square. It was a place of machines, fabric scraps, long hours, crowded tables, and constant pressure to produce. Late that afternoon, a fire began and spread with terrifying speed through light cotton, tissue patterns, and wooden work areas. Within minutes, ordinary labor became a trap. The disaster would kill 146 people and force Americans to confront what modern industry had been allowed to hide above the street.
The workers at Triangle were part of a vast garment economy powered by immigrant labor. Many were Jewish and Italian women and girls who had come through families seeking wages, stability, and a future in the city. Their work required speed and discipline, but it did not give them real power over conditions. The shop floor could be crowded, exits could be controlled, and complaints could be treated as threats to production. Earlier labor activism had already challenged dangerous conditions in the shirtwaist industry. The fire did not emerge from nowhere. It came from a system where warnings were visible, but easier for owners and officials to postpone than to solve.
When flames spread, escape routes failed. Some workers reached stairways, others found doors locked or blocked, a practice often defended as a way to prevent theft or unauthorized breaks. The fire escape was too weak and collapsed under the load. Elevator operators made heroic attempts to carry workers down, but the cars could not save everyone. Fire department ladders did not reach the upper floors. People gathered at windows as smoke and heat closed behind them. Crowds below watched in horror as workers jumped rather than burn. The city saw, in real time, what locked doors meant when profit met fire.
The physical details mattered. Fabric cuttings and paper patterns gave the flames fuel. Narrow aisles slowed movement. Buckets of water and primitive fire equipment were inadequate. The building itself survived, but the factory inside became deadly because safety had been treated as secondary. Disaster often depends on a chain of small permissions: a door left locked, an inspection missed, a stairway too narrow, a drill not practiced, a pile of scraps allowed to grow. At Triangle, those permissions connected into one fatal design. The victims did not die because fire was mysterious. They died because escape had been made fragile.
New York reacted with grief and anger. Bodies were laid out for identification, and families searched for daughters, sisters, wives, and friends. A massive funeral procession moved through rain as thousands of mourners filled the streets. The disaster became public because witnesses had seen people fall from the windows, and because newspapers, labor organizers, and reformers kept the story alive. Grief alone does not always change law, but grief joined to organization can become political force. Triangle became a symbol of industrial cruelty precisely because the victims were not abstractions. They were workers whose lives had been priced below convenience.
The factory owners, Max Blank and Isaac Harris, were tried for manslaughter and acquitted. The verdict intensified public frustration because legal responsibility was difficult to prove under the standards of the time. The acquittal did not mean the workplace had been safe. It meant the law had not yet learned how to hold industrial power accountable for preventable death. Civil settlements later paid small sums to victims' families, but no amount could answer the central question: what is justice when a business model depends on risks imposed on people with little ability to refuse?
The aftermath helped transform workplace regulation. New York created investigative commissions, and reformers pushed laws covering fire drills, unlocked exits, sprinklers, stairways, sanitation, building access, and factory inspections. Labor activists, including women who had organized before the fire, demanded that memory become enforcement. The reforms did not end exploitation, and they were unevenly applied, but they marked a turning point. Triangle showed that workplace safety could not be left only to the conscience of employers. Public authority had to enter the factory because the cost of absence had been counted in bodies on the sidewalk.
The disaster also shaped the political careers of reformers who later influenced broader labor protections. Frances Perkins, who witnessed the fire's aftermath, would become a central figure in American labor policy and eventually U.S. Secretary of Labor. For her and many others, Triangle was not just a tragedy, it was a command. It revealed that democracy had to reach into workplaces where people spent their days under rules they did not write. The fire helped build the argument that safety, wages, hours, and dignity were public questions, not private favors granted by owners.
Triangle remains powerful because its causes still sound familiar. Around the world, garment workers continue to face pressure, low pay, weak inspections, locked exits, and dangerous buildings. Modern consumers often see clothing as cheap and abundant without seeing the labor conditions behind it. The 1911 fire warns that supply chains can hide risk until catastrophe makes it visible. The names and languages change, but the pattern can return whenever speed and cost are valued above human escape. Remembering Triangle means asking not only what happened in New York, but where similar doors may still be locked now.
The tragedy also reveals why inspections must have real authority. A checklist without enforcement can become a ritual that protects institutions more than workers. Before Triangle, dangerous conditions in factories were not invisible to everyone. They were often normalized, excused, or treated as the unavoidable cost of business. After the fire, investigators could point to concrete failures that should have been corrected earlier. That clarity is painful because it means the disaster was not only sudden flame, it was delayed responsibility. The locked door was a physical object, but it was also a political decision about whose safety mattered enough to inconvenience production.
The victims' names remain central to the story. Many were teenagers or young adults supporting families, learning English, saving money, and imagining lives beyond the factory floor. Lists of the dead can look formal on a page, but each name belonged to a household that changed permanently after one workday. Public memorials and annual commemorations resist the habit of turning industrial disasters into statistics. They insist that reform began with individual people whose absence could not be repaired by legislation, settlements, or speeches. The laws mattered because the lives had mattered first.
The Ash Building still stands, now part of New York University, and plaques mark the disaster. A surviving building can make history feel strangely ordinary. Students and pedestrians pass near the place where workers once screamed from windows, and the city continues around it. That is why memory matters. The fire behind locked doors was not an unavoidable accident from a distant age. It was a preventable disaster produced by choices, enforced by inequality, and answered only after loss became impossible to ignore. The legacy of Triangle is every exit kept open, every inspection taken seriously, and every worker treated as someone who must be able to leave alive.